Good day, everyone. On this 10th interview that we're going to have today for our podcast, The Power Is You. And we set up this podcast for the occasion of the book that Nursia Afridi and me launched in March of this year, The Power Is You, an Odyssey towards Self-Empowerment. And we are interviewing women across the globe to hear their amazing stories of self-empowerment. And today we have a wonderful woman who's going to share her story with us. And as usual, Nursia is going to carry out the interview. So Nursia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Saskia, and welcome, Soraya, to our podcast. So,
Thank you.
before starting the questions, I would like you to tell and short about yourself, your background to our audience so they can get to know about you.
Thank you. My name is Soraya Shawki. I am a researcher and a poet. I perform spoken word. My background is ethnically it's Egyptian and Sudanese, but I was born and bred in the Netherlands. And yeah, I have a background in Middle Eastern studies and policy making in terms of studies.
Thank you. So, now I would like to ask questions because in this interview, we want to try to discover what has kept you away from your inner strength and how you can unleash that potential to become you. So, the first question is, what was the most hidden personal fear that has kept hindered you throughout your life?
Yes, that's already a deep question. If I can say, like looking back, what has hindered me throughout my life, I would say the fear of not being accepted or not fitting in has really influenced myself actually. And it started when I was already younger. I grew up in a very like a white neighborhood, and I went to a fairly white school where I was the one of the very few people of color there, and also one of the very few Muslims. And at the same time, being someone with mixed heritage, I also found that sometimes you're not enough of any of those ethnicities. So I struggled a lot with accepting myself as I am and being comfortable with also not fitting in that sense.
Okay, so this was a fear that you are thinking about that you are not accepting or you are not acceptable where you are living with different multicultural people. So, how did you manage to overcome this personal fear? Can you explain a little bit more about this?
Yeah, this requires a lot of I would say failure as well, because I think a tendency people have a lot is that they start to change themselves to fit in, but then you realize that this version of yourself doesn't really, yeah, doesn't uplift to who you want to be. And I would say that realizing that that would never be enough, like you will never be enough for some people. You will never meet their expectations. And I some steps that I took then was trying new things, because as a reaction, sometimes you want to prove yourself, or and I realized that after a lot of introspection that sometimes I didn't know who I wanted to prove. It was definitely not my own expectations. So kind of that friction made me realize that I should just get rid of these expectations and start looking within. What are my own values? How do I want to show up in the world? And how do I live a life that is aligned with the purpose I see for myself? And then doing activities that would help that. And for me specifically, that also meant trying new things that I was new at and not perfect in, because then you're going to make mistakes and then you have to be okay with them. So I would say experiment more with these things. And yeah, yeah, experiment more, I would say.
So you did different experiment to overcome your fears and to become you. Yeah. So my next question is, to achieve something in life, there are always some hurdles and challenges that we need to overcome. So what was some those of challenges and hurdles for you that you needed to overcome?
Hmm. Realistically, um, the sense of that being comfortable with being the odd one out, um, not being able to please everyone, that I had to come to terms with, but also like real hurdles like facing discrimination or being excluded or noticing that people just based on what I look like as a practicing Muslim woman, like in discussions, having them knowing that they have certain prejudices or put me into a certain box. Um, yeah, and breaking out of those boxes liberates yourself, but also sometimes liberates the other person because then they realize like it doesn't have to be this black and white. And yeah, so it's a combination of being comfortable with being the odd one out sometimes as well, because it's
Mm.
ultimately about authenticity for me then in terms of my fears.
So in your case, you mentioned that it was a challenge for you, discrimination, yeah, that you are living on different people and how they treat you. So you managed with this challenge to overcome and what you wanted to become you, and you did it. So is there any like moments of defeat and moments of resurrection in your life when you feel defeated?
Yeah, I think now you were just recapping my answer for the last question. I would like to add that in terms of like facing discrimination and prejudices, um, like getting your confirmation or your self-worth from others or their confirmation of you is never sustainable in the run. So if you find out that what your own principles are, it's much easier to ignore those things and ignore those prejudices. And of course it's going to be tiring and it's an emotional tax. It's emotionally taxing to deal with these things. Sometimes you also just have to pick your battles. And I think surrounding yourself with people that are aligned with your own values, but also are just give you the space to be yourself has really helped me overcome these hurdles as well. So that's comes with trying new things. Sometimes you find new environments, you meet new people um, that yeah, just help you strengthen yourself and also find the strength within yourself. And that makes it easier to then experiment because then it feels like a safe space. And to get to the question about moments of resurrection,
A
um,
moment of defeat.
moment of defeat,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, like a few, like when I was doing my master's, I was doing an internship in Beirut, and this was an internship I actually wanted to do since my bachelor's. It was at the embassy, and when I was younger, I had this dream of becoming a diplomat, and I know I found it very prestigious, but also it sounded like a very exciting life. And once I was there, this really felt like a big accomplishment for myself. But I was there and I noticed that I had such high expectations of what a life would be like. And this was my first trip that I did on my own. So I was there and I didn't know anyone. Of course, I had colleagues, but I felt very lonely and super lost. And it was very weird because I kind of pinned a lot of things on this thing. Like, this is supposed to be everything, or I'm supposed to be super, like having a lot of fun. And I did have fun, but I was very lost, and I that was for me personally a moment of defeat because I realized that all of these things that I was chasing were not like my inner voice telling me that I should do these things. And it's a combination of my environment and like the urge of having to prove myself to whom also. I realized that when I was in Beirut, like, oh, this is really not the way I want to go into or the path I want to take. But have like being there, I remember walking in the city, like in the evening, having a walk on my own, and I was thinking, this is so lonely and so out of touch with who I am. Yeah, so that was a moment of defeat for myself. Like, it's not worth it to chase things that are not coming from yourself, basically. And I only realized it after it happened. So it was a kind of like a low point, but it was very weird because it was also filled with a lot of excitement, and it can be sometimes very like a contrast as well.
Yeah. So this was your life moment of defeat. Yeah. And fortunately, we have the ability to resurrect our will to live, and our resilience and our vitality allows us to stand up every time again. So, is there any moment in your life that you felt, yes, the power is me?
Hmm. I think one of the most recent moments I had this feeling was when I was participating in poetry slam, like the national poetry slam in the Netherlands, and it was the first time I tried out for this poetry slam, and it's kind of elaborate because you have to win in a city and then you go to the national one. And I was doubting myself the entire time because this was last year and I haven't been doing spoken word or poetry for a very long time. So it's this whole process came with a lot of self-doubt as well. And I had to perform in Utrecht, and in Utrecht I didn't know anyone. So you can bring, of course, your own audience, but people who are just loving poetry, they come to these events and then they can vote basically. And it was I I basically made it to the last round and I had to battle this guy who had won already all these prizes. So I was very nervous. Um, but then I performed, and basically you can get the vote from the jury, but also a vote from the audience. And the moment of resurrection, or I would say like a that I felt embraced in a way, was when everyone had these roses when you have to vote, and when they can give they have to give the roses to you. So then after I got the most roses, so I won the public's vote, and I was super surprised because I was doubting myself the whole time, and I felt like, I sometimes feel awkward being like a minority in a room because it was just me and, and my family basically, and then all these other people. Um, but I felt really seen in that moment because I felt like they appreciated me for what I brought as myself, and that has also strengthened me to show up more as myself. And you really don't have anything to lose, if people don't vibe with you, then it's also a win for yourself because that's probably not someone that you would get along with anyway. So that's, yeah, I felt powerful to
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and the wonderful moment of your resurrection, and that you felt, yes, the power is me. So, Saskia, now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And I can picture you standing there with all these roses as a confirmation of what you did. And I feel that your journey is very marked by, on the one hand, you say this duality in your life, your duality of your heritage, but also the duality of expectations and wanting to be yourself. So there is a friction there. You described that there's a friction between who you feel you want to be and what society expects from you, which is also reinforced by maybe by this double heritage of yours, and also the fact that you are confronted with prejudice and stereotypes. So it's really beautiful the way that you somehow dealt with it, that you discovered that you were boxing yourself in, and the way that you described this moment of defeat, I feel that that was also a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
And often it's when we are at our lowest that we have a choice. We either give in or we rise, and this is what you did. So yes, I have a question, because you said that you also are a poet. What brought you to write poems? Can you share that with us?
Oh, yes. Well, I I didn't have this lifelong dream of becoming a poet, but I write from a sense of urgency. So I felt like the first time I wrote a poem or made it, because I did write sometimes for myself in my own diary. I actually submitted to a competition, and it was about freedom. The poem was about freedom, and I wrote it from my own perspective, as I feel like sometimes people project their version of freedom on you, or they think you are oppressed because their vision of freedom doesn't align with what I look like in that sense. So it's a way of me for speaking back. And I also think it has to do with feeling unheard in a way. In many spaces I have felt unheard, I think. And in poetry or in spoken word, people have to listen. So that just, yeah. So it's also like a way of speaking up, or raising awareness. Or I do write from this sense of urgency, and I feel like it just has to spill out sometimes. It's
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's a vehicle for you to really express yourself.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah. I would like you to ask you if you would like to share a poem with us,
of
so
course.
we can listen to that inner voice of yours, which you have laid down in a poem.
Thank you. This poem is about being rooted, and whatever. Colonial legacy had seeped into our minds. Hypnotized by its grip, we started to bleach our skins, dye our hair, uneasy in our complexion. I can only be whole as a woman if I become stick thin. Every reflection in the mirror starts to chip away a piece of us that cannot be retrieved. It is lost in translation until you decide to speak up. Speak up. You're the children of the equator. Speak up. Your inner child sounds like a dictator. Speak up in the name of your creator. We want to live in authenticity, basking in the morning sun, singing the songs that my heart drums, my soul longs. Because every beat is a reminder that I'm free. You start to speak up in your father's tongue, one that should feel like coming home. Every time you code switch to suit the listener, you feel prone to succumb under the pressure, using expressions you have never heard before. Some were borrowed from the others. From your mouth, the fancy words sound foreign. A washed away version of the pieces you glued together of yourself is what you're left with. Home has never been your own. It is a vacant place we inherited, living rent-free your imagination of what you should be. However, it is never too late to set yourself free. Belonging, settled in the hope of my ancestors, who survived a world not meant for them to thrive in. Although growth is circumstantial and I am lucky, the way they paved is clear. The way they paved is rocky. So to honor the sacrifices of those who came before, I will live it to my core. That becoming is not a one size fits all. Because in the heart of your being, where truths intertwine, lies the essence of you, both vast and divine, rooting deep in the soil of moments so true. To dance with yourselves with identities free is to honor the vastness of all you can be, in a space that is safe, where consciousness grows, where tools of the spirit and heart interpose. So when you wonder of what has become, come home to yourself, a place to belong. Thank you.
What a beautiful poem. I think we don't need to say anything. Really beautiful. I think
Thank you.
it says it all. Thank you so much, Soraya, for sharing your story and this fantastic poem with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.